Good evening, Mayor and City Council. It is an honor to be here tonight to present and propose a balanced city budget for 2025. A tremendous amount of work and diligence have gone into forming and shaping the budget by the leadership of the city and the respective departments, and I just want to acknowledge that leadership with the department directors over across the room, and especially acknowledge our finance director, Troy Wu, and his finance staff for pulling all this information together, running the numbers, doing the projections, and creating this document that's going to be before you tonight. This budget focuses on advancing council priorities, maintaining city facilities and equipment, strategically using reserves, and controlling expenditures as we face rapidly increasing costs, combined with a modest or slowing of revenue growth. In light of these conditions, we've been very careful of not increasing ongoing operational costs with expansion of services and staffing. For example, of the 14 positions that have been requested, the three that are proposed within this budget are tied to direct funding sources. That doesn't mean the other 11 positions aren't needed. They are very much needed to continue the growth and services of the public. However, under the current conditions, we cannot add them at this time. But even with this effort, this budget proposes signed reserves to cover our operating deficit. Despite this, I believe the city is in a good place thanks to good financial stewardship, past financial stewardship by the council, past city managers, as well as the staff. That places us in a position today to address the shortfall we're experiencing, but also gives us time to start the work to begin to prepare and address the structural issues of the city's budget over the next couple of years. That said, in presenting the budget tonight, I'll provide an overview of our budgeting approach, the primary budget funds, revenues and expenditures, staffing, and 2025 investments. And I'll also highlight some of those challenges and next steps that we need to take to set up for the 2026 budget year and beyond. And they do have quite a few slides tonight, but I'll try to work through them fairly quickly. And first, I'd like to highlight the characteristics of the city and highlight some of the development activities that's been occurring with the private investment in our community. So, at a glance, with the city of Lacey, Lacey's population is 60,210. This past year is the year we exceeded the 60,000 mark in population. When I gave this presentation last year, we're at 59,000 and I believe around 700. In total number of housing units, we have about just under 25,000 total housing units in the city of Lacey, and that kind of complements the information that Ryan Andrews just shared regarding the housing allocations. What's a really interesting statistic is 57% of those housing units are owner occupied, and that's based off of the 2020 census information that's just been recently updated in the housing work by Thurston Regional Planning Council. And of course, in terms of median home price, right now is about $505,000, with an average rent for an 845 square foot apartment is about $1,738. So we still are facing some of those high costs within the community and the need to look at housing options for those that, as Ryan just mentioned. In terms of business community, we have about just under 1,500 businesses registered in the city of Lacey that employ about just under 24,000 individuals. Commercial industrial space, we have just over 15 million square feet. And we've seen some changes in our vacancy rates between this year and last. In terms of office, that's stated about 10% vacancy rate. And it still hasn't quite recovered under the pandemic, and we don't know if that will. As we see and heard tonight on previous action by council, we've had one former office building being converted into apartments. And I think we'll see some more of that as we look forward in the near future. In terms of industrial, we're currently at an 8.3% vacancy rate. That is up from 4% last year. And then retail has climbed to 7.5% from a 5% level last year. And I think we've seen those vacant retail spaces open up over the past year with some of the national trends and some of our national or stores with national presence. And of course, our multifamily vacancy rates countywide number is about 4.6%, so it's still in a good position in the market. In terms of staffing growth, I just want to highlight that over the last 10 years, we've created 97 new positions for the city of Lacey. And you can see through the bar chart that those additions of staffing has been not consistent every year. It's been as resources were available or program needs require. And of course, it shows this year looking at adding 3 additional positions. Also over this time, we've added new programs. I really want to highlight that as well, because as we've tried to increase staffing to serve a growing population, we've also added new programs, as you can see listed there on the left-hand side of the screen, related to homeless response, rapid response team, housing, climate and sustainability, human services, communication, equity and inclusion, and Lacey Makerspace. And in communications, we really have had that type of program, but we made it more robust with a transition from TC Media last year. Of those 97 positions, 30 of those positions were related to our utility funds, so they had direct funding support from our utility system, or our enterprise funds. The other 67 are general fund positions, breaking out to about 30 positions created in the police department, 15 in public works under the general fund, 14 in our city managers, public affairs, human resource and finance departments, 5 in community economic development, and 3 in parks. So that's kind of the strata of positions that we've increased as we've have grown significantly over the last 20 years. This slide I just want to highlight really quickly is that even though we've added 97 employees and these new programs, our staffing levels in comparison to the number of people in our community per thousand is remain fairly constant. So again, that kind of demonstrates that as the community's grown, we're staying steady, but we also can see a need for more additional resources to continue to provide services in the future. So in terms of private community investments in the community, this is one of those litmus tests. We see what how that will affect our local markets and future revenues. We have started to see a little bit of plateau as we've grown and mature as a community, changing from that rapidly growing community to now one of more looking at infill type development. The private developments that currently have land use permit approval or into the construction stage are listed on the screen here. And I won't go through each one of those projects, because I promised Sarah Schilling, our current planning and economic development manager, that I wouldn't steal her thunder, because she'll be giving a presentation to the council in November, providing a full community development update. But just want to show this as an example that we do have some development activity occurring between expansion of 2 additional hotels, some commercial projects totaling about 80,000 square feet, continue to get some mixed-use development occurring with about 90,000 square feet and about just over 700 multifamily units, and then some pure residential projects as well. So we still have projects coming forward, just maybe not the size and scale like we've seen like in the industrial sector or commercial sector. In terms of housing starts, again, this is looking back to 2016. You've seen past presentations I've given talking about the cycle of housing development in the city of Lacey for the past 20 years, with before 2015 primarily single-family residents, 2016 switching to more of the multifamily to fill that void that had been created in the market. Now we're starting to see that plateau out as that multifamily market is now, the vacancy rate's now starting to climb, so we're starting to see that investment temper. So in 2024, year to date, we've issued about permits for about 103 multifamily units and 34 single-family homes. And our pipeline that we've always talked about is also starting to decrease a little bit too. And so we have about 304 single-family units in the pipeline and 1,200 multifamily units as well. And so that kind of goes into our methodology for projections in terms of looking at development activity and the scale to make those revenue projections and where the trends are leading us going forward. So that brings me to the total budget for 2025. And as a first step, I'd like to always just talk about our approach to developing the budget. And of course, the first and priority is we make sure we apply the fiscal policies adopted by council in 2013. And the highlight of the 4 primary portions of those policies is we want to incorporate the council priorities into the budget. One thing I really want to say for that, as a council's aware, we had a retreat back in June that started the process of reevaluating our priorities and council work plan. And we will continue that work into this rest of this year and culminating in a retreat in the end of January as we're looking at scheduling to re-hone and finalize those priorities, update, excuse me. The other policy is to make sure when we look at the budget that we provide adequate resources for maintenance and replacement of capital facilities and equipment, because as we add more equipment or add more facilities, we need to make sure that they're in good operating or condition for the public. Also, of course, the budget must be balanced. That's not only a fiscal policy that's adopted by council, it's also state law. And then also another big factor is that the city will only propose operating expenditures that can be supported from ongoing operating revenues, unless council determines that limited unusual circumstances warrant the use of one-time reserves to cover operating costs in a particular year. And I'll talk a little bit more about that later in my presentation. So as you look at the 4 or 5 steps that we look at in priority of budget approach, again, applying those fiscal policies, implementing council priorities, maintaining existing services, and addressing critical needs, and then we start looking at expanding programs and services if resources allow. So the 2025 proposed total budget is $280,298,435. This budget is split up into 31 funds highlighted by these primary 6 larger buckets. We actually added 2 new funds this year. You're going from 29 to 31 funds. If the council recalls, we, with the passage of Proposition 1 last year, we've added the public safety dollars into, and we set that up as a separate fund so we can track those expenditures allocated for law enforcement and public safety purposes. And then also with looking at going out and issuing bonds against our real estate excise tax revenues, we set up a separate fund to track the receipts of our real estate excise tax dollars so we can track and transfer out for those bond payments and other allocations for those funds for city priorities. Just really quick, this is a busy slide, but I just want to touch upon the proposed 2025 budget versus 2024. And this is also articulate that every budget from year to year can change dramatically, but that doesn't mean that there's issues going on with our budget. So for instance, this year's budget is, a general fund budget is 20% less than last year's, but that's primarily because we have capital transfers coming in and out of the general fund. We had ARPA dollars that were transferred out for the police station. So that's what shows the difference between those fund balances. So year to year, budgets can be looking significantly different depending on what's occurring in that particular year for transfers in as well as capital projects. But now I want to kind of just focus a little bit on the general fund budget because that's where we see the most, some of the most challenges. Again, the general fund budget for 2025 is just over $78 million. And what's making up that budget is the general fund revenues, which, as I think the council is aware, our primary revenue sources are sales tax, property tax, utility tax, and B&O tax. And when we look at projecting our revenues for the general fund, again, those taxes make up 54% of our revenues. In calculating that, we want to just highlight that the revenue projections are conservative based on our historic and most recent trends, including the last 4 months of declining and flat sales tax. Also, the slowing population growth, as you know, and coupled with that, the slowing of development activity and non-retail expansion. Again, we are a maturing city, and as we've grown over the last 15 years in a fast pace, we've had a lot of bumps in assessed value, as well as population growth that also turn into purchases at local stores and those type of things, and online purchases. As our population growth starts to flatten out and development activity slows down, we'll see, want to be a bit more conservative about our future tax revenues are, so we see what that new trend is. But again, as I mentioned before, we still have some of those development projects in the hopper, and we are also actively working on economic development, business retention, expansion practices to try to recruit more private investment. And so as we go into this next year, we'll continue to monitor our revenues, and if trends start to change, and we'll come back to council with maybe some considerations mid-year amendments to address current resource issues that we may see coming this year. But again, looking at projecting into 2025, we are being very conservative, and but again, we'll be monitoring it as we move forward. So this particular slide kind of shows the history of sales tax. Again, you can see the volatility of sales tax going back to 2014 with some steady declines up to 2019, then the drop off during the pandemic, and slowly climb out of that of the pandemic years. The other thing to think about too is this also can show when we had some of our heavier development activities. When you see double-digit jumps in sales tax, that's usually when we saw some expansion of industrial or multifamily projects. And for example, from 2022 to 2023, we had a lot of multifamily projects come online, as well as some industrial activity. However, going into 2025, we're looking at a sales tax projection about $19 million, $19.3 million, up just over 4% from 2024. But one thing I want to highlight, that $2.2 million increase, $2.1 million of that is the new public safety tax increase. And so if you take away that $2.1 million, really we are seeing we're projecting about an $87,000 unrestricted sales tax increase going into 2025. And again, that's predicated on the last 4 to 6 months of sales tax activity, and coupled with the slowing down of some of the development and population growth going forward. Property tax revenue, which is another main source and consistent source of revenue for the city. We're looking, going into 2025, projecting a $300,000 increase to our property tax. As you can see by that bar chart going back to 2011, it's been generally a 3 to 4% increase, except for a couple of years. When you look at our increase going forward, again, property tax, most of the increase we see comes from new assessed valuation coming on the books. We're capped by the existing ratepayers at a 1% growth or existing levy from year to year. So when you look at that and apply that, of that 300,000 projected increase, 88,000 of that is the 1% cap. So total increase would be about $213,000 of new property tax revenue based off of assessed value coming to the city. Again, this is another item we're going to be continuing to monitor, but as we move forward and depending on the scale of our development projects or increase in assessed value from year to year, we may see that rate of 3 to 4% drop down closer to a 1% level, again, depending on assessed valuation increase from year to year. So this is always a slide that really highlights the levy growth for the city. Right now, the assessed valuation for the city is just over $13 billion. It jumped up $1 billion in assessed value from the previous year. Of course, the previous year saw a decline from 2023 of $500 million. So again, we ramped up, but as our assessed valuation goes up, our levy rate goes down. And so projecting into 2025, the levy rate for our property owners will be 69 cents per thousand. And what's significant about that number is our maximum capacity for our levy rate is $1.60. So that just shows there's some flexibility in there potentially for council consideration in the future if they're looking at particular capital projects or something like that. There's some capacity there to look at and potential flexibility. Again, this is a kind of a highlight of the major fund sources for the City of Lacey's budget. Again, sales tax is our biggest source at just over $19 million in revenue. Second is service fees. Service fees at just under $13 million. And I think I want to highlight about service fees is those are fees that are recovered from building permits, parks fees, but more significantly internal fees in the department. So when a capital project comes in, either a utility fund pays for that project, if it's a water project, or if it's a parks project, general fund dollars. So it's the internal transfer of fees. And then you have property tax at just over $9 million in projected growth or revenues, and followed by the utility tax and B&O tax. All in all, with the total projections, it comes out to just under $58 million in projected general fund revenue sources. This is the general fund departments broken out by size and effect of the general fund. As you can see, the Public Works Department is our largest general fund department at just under 100 employees and just under $20 million in expenditures, and followed by the Police Department and on down on the list. All in all, the total general fund expenditures is $78,279.80. Or just under $79 million. So how they, kind of add a little bit more context to how those departments affect the general fund dollars. One is kind of hit a couple of departments and their total cost or expenditures for 2025. And here we have the cost of Parks, Culture, and Recreation. That just $7.7 million. And the top three items, the parks maintenance of all our parks, Rainier Vista, Rainier, and the Regional Athletic Complex, those are our parks facilities and maintenance needs. And those combined total just over $4 million. So just want to kind of highlight that with our park system, operating our facilities and maintaining those facilities is more than 50% of our parks budget, and make sure we have quality level of service to the community. The other big expenditure, but important to the community, is maintaining our streets. We want to make sure we have good quality infrastructure, that they're safe. People can get from points from home to wherever they need to go and back, safe and on good, and be able to use the sidewalks and all those type of things. So take just under $5 million for street maintenance, for sidewalks, signs and markings, street lighting, just roadside and road maintenance, and then general operation of the street department. This does not include the transportation benefit dollars that goes into also maintaining our streets and our overlays every year, which is just over $4 million. So combined total, we spend over $9 million to maintain our infrastructure, and I think maintain it very well, and it's something that is well acknowledged out in the community. Then, of course, the other element that's really important is public safety. But the cost of public safety is one of our biggest costs combined. So we talk about public safety, we usually talk about the police department, but which is a big component or the primary component. But you also have to have those follow-up services, whether it's court services, jail, or prosecution. So all combined, the total for public safety is $22.5 million of expenditures. One continual note of interest is, in order to pay for public safety, it takes 100% of our sales tax revenue and 35% of our property tax revenue just for public safety alone. And so that makes it also challenging to figure out how we can fund other departments that have those same needs.
Is that including the Prop 1 money?
Yes.
Right.
Yes. And that Prop 1, but I didn't mention it during the sales tax and that effect, that Proposition 1 dollars is very important, and it's just one of those things we shouldn't look lightly upon, because if those dollars didn't come in, we'd be in a different situation today, because we were able to maintain 5 positions that were previously funded under reserves, and those reserves were due to run out this year. And so we were able to continue those positions and then add 4 additional officers with those Proposition 1 dollars. And it takes a little bit of pressure off that need compared to the other needs of the city. So thank you for bringing that up and pointing that out. And all in all, in the general fund breakdown, local government, we're a people-serving business, right? And so we need people to help serve the public and provide the services they need. And so as such, that's our primary and precious resource, and it also makes up 68% of the expenditures in our general fund. And again, to articulate the impact of that is, that course, that expenditure, the cost of salary and wages grows from year to year over time, the cost of that labor. Going back to 2022, we saw a 7.5% jumping to a 9% between 23 and 24, and a 9.5% jump this year. Now, if you think back to those property tax revenues and sales tax revenues, those we're climbing at the 4% to 3% range and starting to flattening out. So you can kind of see the challenges we may face going forward in terms of revenues versus expenditures in order to maintain and keep providing the high level of service we do to our community. So just kind of articulate that point a little bit more is this slide just really shows the top 6 general fund tax revenue sources that we have in the city and their projected increases going into 2025. All told, it will come together to about $910,000 in projected revenues. You take our salary and wage increases from last year, and again, this is without adding any staffing to those funds. We're looking at about $3.8 million in expenditures. So that gets us down to a deficit of about $2.9 million, and that's kind of where we were starting from, and also the reason why we're looking at this structural deficit we've been talking about that we're proposing to cover with the assignment of reserves for this year in order for us to start developing a strategy to set up for 2026 budget. So going to the general fund workforce enhancements, we do have one position. Again, this is tied to the Proposition $1 dedicated funding. We will be requesting to authorize the filling of a lieutenant position. This will be the 3rd position of 4 ultimately. That's been a transition plan. It's been in place for the city for the last, I believe, 3 years in terms of we transition from the commander structure to a 4 lieutenant model. Other general fund enhancements, again, as we looked at these, we were looking at funding these enhancements with one-time monies or reserves. And we talked about in our fiscal policies of needing to maintain our facilities. And I think as the council recalls, about a year and a half ago, we started a huge effort to look at capital facilities planning and see what our facility needs, whether it be animal services, shop facility, or city hall. And so this is the next step of that, of starting that process to start planning what we may need to do financially over the next, in 6 years out of improving these facilities. So we're looking at including into this year's budget funding to start the preliminary designs for city hall improvements. So once the police department moves out into their new facility at the police station, assess city hall and look how we can find efficiencies and accommodate additional use of the building in the future. And then also, as I think we've talked about, everybody's aware, the Public Works Operations Center, they're also busting at the seams, an aging building, and we need to look at how we expand or grow that facility. And so we'll also look at putting money aside to hire a consultant to start with that preliminary design work this next year as well. In terms of a vibrant, diverse economy and economic development initiatives, this budget includes almost $1 million of economic investments tied with specifically the $200,000 to fund the makerspace for the 2025 year, $145,000 to make ADA improvements, operate the night market that I think council recalls has been very successful this last year and has been growing with each event, and then also providing other amenities on site as well. So, and then we also looking at have another $350,000 towards economic programs that include supporting the Economic Development Council with their efforts, as well as continue to fund the business resource training or the BIPOC business training programs that we started several years ago. The other big year, and we've talked about it quite a bit, the 2025 comprehensive plan update. We have about $950,000 dedicated for that. Most of that comes from Commerce grant dollars. We also are using arterial street dollars to help fund the transportation plan. It's going to be another big piece of that puzzle, and I think that's going to be a heavy workload for our staff as well as council to move forward this next year to update that comprehensive plan. In terms of environmental stewardship, and we heard some comments tonight about the climate initiative and the climate action plan, we are looking at continuing to fund initiatives that have been highlighted by council. The Puget Sound Energy Matching Rebate Program, continue to fund that with another $250,000. That was, I think, very successful last year. And that program is where we would match 100% PSE rebate for individuals to make energy efficiency improvements within their home. That, last year, we had a $200,000 allocated to the program. It lasted about 5 months before we ran out of dollars. It was very popular. We also will continue the program that Scott's team in Public Works started probably 7 years ago and starting to transition of replacing our LED lights in our street system. So we'll continue to fund that at a $200,000 level. Also continue to work on electric vehicle charging stations. Part of that comp plan update is also looking at updating and creating sub-elements of the comp plan related to climate action and climate resiliency. And then the Energize Thurston program is a program that is, again, an incentive program to offer to individuals, especially low-income households, that they would like to move off of gas and move into electric appliances and heating systems, that gives them the opportunity to do that with financial incentives. Most of these dollars come from grants, whether it be the HERE funding or commerce grants, as well as city funds to help initiatives, climate action initiatives. Also, again, going back to maintenance and quality of infrastructure, we have several maintenance projects we need to do in our park system. One is replacement and repair of Long's Pond Dock. It's a popular fishing dock. It's getting more and more in disrepair, and so we need to replace it before we need, or else we'll need to close it off to the public. The same thing goes for the Wooden Creek pedestrian bridge. We did a design last year for its ultimate replacement, and it's getting in more disrepair, and so we're looking at funding its full replacement this next year as part of a capital project. Another piece is, if you may recall, when we purchased the property adjacent to Long Lake Park, there was an existing old house. We're putting money aside for potential removal of that house. We're doing a historic assessment of that to see what the historical character is, and also the structural suitability. So we want to put a placeholder in the event that we may need to remove that house, but document historic significance that we may be able to do so. Also, going back to facilities, we're looking at the community center, refinishing the wood floors. As you know, the community center is rented and used quite heavily, and so the floors are starting to need to be refinished or need to be replaced. And then also the same thing for the Virgil Clarkson Senior Center. It was a carpet, and we need to replace some carpeting in there, so we put some funds aside for that. And then Timberland Regional Library also needs some lighting fixture upgrades, as well as they would like to build a couple of small 4-person conference rooms. They're running into a situation where one large conference room gets reserved by 2 or 3 people, and so large groups cannot use it, so they want to create some more capacity. We're putting $50,000 towards that project and see what the estimates come in. If the estimates come in over $50,000, Timberland Regional Library is pledged to cover the overage costs through the Friends of the Library. So it's something that we want to continue that effort in partnership. And again, going back to programs and services and investment in especially human services, we're continuing to fund those council priorities, including the Human Services Grant Program, which council has just reviewed last work session. Continue our rapid response cleanup program to support our homeless response. And again, continue to fund the Regional Housing Council with the $1,406 and the 0.5% of our general retail sales. And again, neighborhood grant program. Do you have a question, sir?
No.
Oh. So those programs are continuing to be funded within this and continue those as part of the council priorities. So in terms of capital projects, we do have about $72 million in capital projects. So these are projects that are identified in either our transportation improvement programs or capital or CIPs. And of course, I think everybody is fully aware of one of our bigger capital programs or projects that we've had in a long, long time, and that's our new police station. This is the second year of that program. So for 2025 budget year, we're looking at $36.9 million in allocations. Again, we are going to be funding $18 million of that through revenue bonds using real estate excise tax dollars, and we're going to be starting that bond process later this year, setting up for issuance of those bonds in the first quarter of 2025. So that process is underway, and again, we are still on track to finish the project by the end of 2025. And as you noticed, if you came into the parking lot during daylight, you see the seal going up. It's going up quite fast. They're still projecting that they'll have the roof on at the end of December, so they continue work. So that is moving forward very smoothly without a lot of disruption. Great Cuyo Park, Phase 1A, and this is another one that's been on the books for some time. We are now getting down to final design, and looks like we're on schedule to go out for bids by the end of the year, so we will be able to start construction in early 2025. We budgeted $6.4 million for that project, and of course, that's the first phase, and it's going to include the park entrance, parking lot, all accessible playground, picnic shoulder, and the 18-hole disc golf course. So that will be a really nice amenity that will be coming up to the northwest Lacey. One thing I do want to highlight about this, and this goes back to our staffing issues and monitoring revenues, is when this comes on in end of 2025, as well as the police station, we're going to need more maintenance, and we're going to need to monitor our revenues, and that may be one of the mid-year adjustments we look at. If we have the capacity, is add on staff for maintenance of these facilities, because right now that is an identified need. Yes.
Is that 6.5, that 649, is that the engineer's estimate, or is that?
That is currently, or it's what we budgeted for. Right now, design estimate is a little bit, about $200,000 more of that, but we want to see what the bid climate is before we come back and look at amendments for the council.
And then when we talked about Phase 1, we talked about an M&O shed. It was going to be on the, I guess that's going to be in Phase 2.
Oh, maintenance?
Yeah.
That'd be in Phase 2, and it'd be on the, I believe it's in Phase 2. Is that correct, Jen?
What's the question?
The maintenance shed that we were talking about, is
Oh,
that Phase 2?
maintenance shed. No, Phase 1B, finishing Phase 1 would be restrooms, utilities, frontage improvements, landscape, and then the public priorities, which is trails and second part of the playground.
So we'll carry maintenance equipment out there as needed for the first.
Yes.
Yeah. That's what
Yeah, and that Phase 1B, 1A, 1B, but the second project will be the east side of Carpenter Road in the maintenance facility.
Yeah.
Also, moving forward on looking at design concepts for RAC Phase 3 project, we're looking at establishing $1.5 million to develop that design. As the council is aware, we need to get to a finished design in 2026 in order to be prepared to issue bonds to extend the PFD for 15 years in 2027. With this schedule, this is a schedule that the design would be completed in June, July of 2025. However, we'll have a council check-in in February of 2025 to look at what is the suitability of that site. Currently, we have a biologist outside doing a habitat assessment, so we'll have some idea what is the developable area. And then once the consultants are on board, we can look at initial suitability to see what is possible on that property versus a very, right now, is a wild guess with the terms of oak habitat and potential gopher mitigation. Also, this year, the Transportation Benefit District I alluded to earlier, it's about a $4.3 million project. It includes overlay projects at 6th Avenue Northeast, part of the College Street extension process, tying projects together. 8th Avenue rehabilitation as well. Britton Gateway roundabout overlay. That was one we had I'd looked at doing previous year, but we had to do some additional site assessment for utilities, and so we moved it forward to this year. And then, of course, part of that's going to be 2025 sidewalk repair. I believe it's $1.5 million. And this is, Public Works has gone out and conducted an inventory of all the various sidewalks in the community, looking at damaged sidewalks and rating them on a worst to better condition. And this is to start that process of looking at repairing those sidewalks based on their degree of risk. Also, another project, which I think everybody has been aware of for a long time, is College Street Extension. That is about a $6.8 million project. Now, that also couples a lot of other improvements too, in terms of water, wastewater, and the overlay project of 6. So that's why that number is at $6.8 million total. But this is, we have the right-of-way in place, and it's ready to go out to bid and be in the construction this next year. So that'd be a nice needed connection, and hopefully will provide relief to the neighbors around there from traffic that's traveling through their neighborhood that we had to work with on some traffic calming measures.
Did you, on that project, does the extension trigger frontage on 15th at all, or is it just?
It will connect and create a radius intersection and curb returns, but it wouldn't extend frontages along 15th, no.
Okay.
And this is a list of the other capital projects in the transportation plan, including $500,000 for bicycle pedestrian improvements. Again, I mentioned the EV chargers earlier, and the College Street extension, of course, is on there as well, and that's the cost of the extension at 6. So again, we have a robust capital improvement program going into this year with quite a few projects and improvements in the community. Some of these are on the planning stage as well, as you look at College Street and 29th Avenue. It's still in the design stage, but we're still identifying that as a budgeted process. Special revenue section of the budget. This is a section that is really focused on 2 different funds. One is the Hicks Lake Management District. Council is aware that the property owners around Hicks Lake formed a district, and as part of that formation, the city of Lacey is managing their funds that they receive from their assessments, and when they identify projects, disperse those funds on their authority. This year, that fund will be right around $50,000 in holdings. One thing I do want to just foreshadow for the council is that they are looking at potentially reducing their assessments, and as part of that process, they have to come to council. Council will have to hold a public hearing and then take action. That will be scheduled for council on November 19th, and in order to meet the timeframes of the county for those assessments to be completed.
Do you have an update on when the
Yeah, same thing.
when the apartments are going to go in and what that will do to the Hicks Lake Management District? I don't remember. It's obviously going to add quite a bit of revenue, I think.
I believe there's 2 apartment projects. The one that is, I think it's South Sound Homes. I think they moved forward with site work this fall and some tree removal. But they're going to button up the site for erosion control purposes to protect the surrounding shoreline from any erosion from the site during the wet weather, and then they'll start construction this next spring. The other project, I am not sure of the status of. I'm kind of looking over at Vanessa. I believe that other project's still on hold and hasn't moved forward since their
And they don't have to start paying to the Hicks Lake Management District until occupancy, or when?
They have some level of assessment today as a property owner, but as to the improved value, it wouldn't happen until that project is built and the assessed value is established.
Okay.
Did you want me to address the Hicks Lakes project?
Oh, I just, the
Second hook.
I can't remember which one, it's the Gateway or the Gate project. I think it's on hold indefinitely at this point, right?
Yeah, the first one that they've removed the trees for is temporary hold until the erosion control restrictions are removed at the end of the wet season, and then they'll be able to continue construction. The other project has expired.
Oh, it's expired?
Mm-hmm.
So will that have to come back before this council?
No, they would have to apply for a new land use application, and most likely that would go to a hearing examiner.
Well, yeah,
Yeah.
now it won't come back before us.
Yeah.
Right? Wow, okay.
And there's two different approvals on there. There's the land use approval and then the shoreline approval. Now, so there's some complexity there as well.
So the one that expired, how many units was that?
I'd have to look it
I
up
don't
really quick
remember.
to tell you.
Okay.
Wow, I can't believe they let that expire.
Well, when we had the high interest rates going on and
Sure.
financing, that created some challenges. And both projects were running slow, and then the one that cleared the site was able to get their financing in place and move forward. The second special revenue fund is our lodging tax budget. Again, I think the council is very aware of our lodging tax program. That's where we collect a 4% tax on room nights at local hotels. It's technically, affectionately referred to as the heads and beds. The idea of the lodging tax dollars we collect that and fund events and facilities that bring tourism into the area to bring more people to utilize the hotels and restaurants and everything else. This year's budget for the lodging tax fund is $607,000. And the lodging tax committee has met over the summer and reviewed the application submitted for the 2025 year, went through a scoring metrics, and have made their recommendations on funding. Up here you see on the slide there were 30 total applicants and 29 awards representing 22 organizations. We kind of divided them into categories, 3 categories, one being special events and facilities, which received 35.5% of the funding at an amount of $215,000. Tourism-related facilities, which is things like the Regional Athletic Complex, the Washington Center for Performing Arts, the South Sound Chamber, the museum, and the Makerspace, funded at 48% or $291,000. And then tourism marketing and promotion, which is the VCB of Thurston County, also known as Experience Olympia and Beyond, at 16.5%. So that's the recommendations from the Lodging Tax Committee for this coming year's programs.
Can we get a breakdown of what those what events are receiving what? I know you have an overview there, but I'm kind of sort of curious of what events are receiving what dollars.
I don't have a breakdown with me in my presentation tonight, but we can provide that to council.
Yeah.
And then as we go forward and have more detailed conversations on the budget, to have those conversations and questions.
Thank you.
Next, we're going into the 2025 budget enterprise, or the enterprise funds for the 2025 budget. And these are our utility funds. The total utility fund budget for this 2025 year is projected to be $120 million, or just under. And again, for our utilities, there are the 3 primary utilities. It's our water system, which produces about 2.7 billion gallons of water annually. Our wastewater system, which is handles about 1.5 million gallons of sewer and collects it and transfers it down to our regional partner at Lot. And then, of course, in our stormwater facilities, there's over 5,200 catch basins, 47 storm facilities, and 100 miles of stormwater pipe. Very expansive systems. They cost a lot to maintain, but also, too, they're very critical to the infrastructure for our community, and our community relies on that service to be not interrupted. As we look at the capital projects in the water fund, going into 2025, we're projecting about $27 million in capital projects. The total water CIP currently is $136 million for the 6 years you see there. In terms of the residential water bill related to funding that capital expansion and our maintenance program for the water utility, the council may recall the council approved a 3-year utility rate system. So in 2025, that will increase by 5.25%, or a monthly charge of $40.66 for a utility customer. That will also looking at having about $6 million in potential capital debt in 2025 as well. And in 2026, 2027, those utility rates will extend out over time as we move forward. In terms of wastewater, the total capital improvement program is $53 million, and we're looking at 2025 having around $18 million in projects. And again, in terms of the wastewater bill and utility rates, same thing as the water program. The council approved a 3-year rates, and in 2025, that'll be a 9.5% increase, equaling the wastewater bill to our customers at $85.49. That includes lot charges as well. And we're not anticipating any debt in our wastewater fund in 2025. So overall, Lacey utility rates, compared to 2024, on the right-hand side is the 2025 adopted rates. You see some incremental increases from looking at the top of the chart in terms of stormwater. the rate climbs from $14.16 to $14.79, and you can look down the comparable charts down to the lot charges, wastewater, and water, for a combined total in 2025 about $131.56. Just $8 and some change increase from 2024. And these numbers do not include the utility tax rate in it. So what does that fund? Every year we have a robust capital improvement program for our utilities, and also maintenance and support. This is where the other two positions that were created this year was in our stormwater and our water utilities. The first position is our Stormwater Engineering Tech 3. As we go into multiple years of the NPDES permit, Phase 2 permit issued by the Department of Ecology, it has incremental requirements for monitoring and maintenance. And so we need to add on this year, which was anticipated in the Stormwater Competency Plan, add on a Stormwater Engineering Tech 3 for stormwater inspections and compliance program. And then in the water system, we're adding a journey level technician. One of the things as we've grown in services and not having staff, we need to replace, well, not replace, but we need to create a position that's focused on water sampling to make sure we're able to sample our water system and meet our reporting compliance with Department of Health. Some of the major capital projects is the pH treatment program at the Madrona and Westside Wells. This is the second year of a 2-year project, so we've already spent about 50% of the funds, and the remaining funds to be allocated in 2025 is this $8.3 million. And then, of course, the next slide is the other major water improvement program or capital projects that's listed for 2025. As you can see, there's dollars attributed to the College Street Extension for installing water mains. We're doing some work in the 400 pressure zone off of Pacific, Chapman, and Millbank roads. Also making improvements to the Marvin Road production well and the Meridian Campus production well as well. And then there's several other projects that are in that queue for 2025 that aren't listed in this screen. In terms of wastewater, we have, again, a total of about $18 million, just over $18 million of capital projects. And as you can see, we have a lot of maintenance and upgrades to our lift stations 9, 3, and 23. Well, primarily mostly lift station work is highlighted on this particular list. So now we're on to debt. And of course, as I think the council is very well aware, the city's in a very good financial position in terms of debt. Our debt service currently is fairly low. We're anticipating about just over $1 million in debt service for 2025. Again, our debt capacity, this highlights the allowable amount of debt that we could take on by state law, which we would never do because we wouldn't be able to afford it. But it just kind of shows the good financial stewardship of the city in the past of paying as we go and making sure that we don't overextend ourselves with debt. The one bond we have out there, the general obligation bond, that's voter approved. This was the funded the improvements for Rainier Vista Parks and other elements of our park system. It was refunded, I believe, in 2015. It is due to be resolved in December of 2026. So we're looking at an annual payment this coming year of $362,000, and again, as I said, retiring that debt in 2026. This is a table that shows all of our existing debts, including our revenue bonds and our water and stormwater utilities. Those are expected. There's payments of $603,000 due in 2025. Those are planned to be expired in 2033. And you have the 2017 revenue bonds for LID 24. This is an assessment program, which will expire in 2032. And I mentioned the Parks Improvement Bond. And then we also have the RAC Phase 2 bonds that are due to expire in 2027, which I alluded to earlier is we need to put the Phase 3 improvements in place prior to that expiration in order to continue the 5-year extension. Again, going into our internal service funds, and again, this goes back to fiscal policies. We need to maintain our equipment and our facilities, and this is where our internal services fund comes into play. So in 2025, we're looking at about just $8.7 million in expenditures in our internal service fund. That internal service fund looks at the equipment rental for our city fleet, which includes just over 200 vehicles, as well as all those devices, the laptops and printers and cell phones, et cetera, which we have over 750 devices. So not only do we need to fund financial replacement of those, we also need to fund our IS department to have people that do troubleshooting and replacement and repairs and all those type of things. So it's one of those things we take pride in trying to do as much as we can to fund and make sure our equipment's in good operating order. This year in fleet enhancements, we have just under $2.7 million in replacements that are going to be funded. The list extends from in our streets department with trucks and mowers and dump trucks, parks maintenance, working with electric carts and a John Deere tractor. All in all, we're going to be, we identified, I think there's, the majority of this list is replacement vehicles. There are 3 vehicles that are going to be new vehicles that will then start into adding to our equipment replacement rates. So all in all, about $2.7 million in expenditures just to keep our fleet up to standard. So in past presentations, there's always been the value proposition. I just have a couple slides here to kind of look at that. And I think council is already aware too that we had at the work session last week, County Assessor Stephen Drew talk about property tax and how that functions. But in terms of value proposition, sales tax, that's another piece that, people looking at that sales tax, they sometimes think that the city collects the entire 9.7%, but it's not necessarily so. If you have a $100 sale, that sales tax collected for that $100 sale is about $9.70. The city of Lacey receives 85 cents of that transaction. And so when you take that in context, there's a lot of services being provided for that 85 cents of a $9.70 sales tax. We also include a 2/10 for TBD as well, or excuse me, for the public safety tax. And so that's another element that comes and benefits countywide. In terms of property taxes, looking at in 2025, the average home value of $500,000 with a regular tax levy rate of 69 cents and the excess levy rate of 0.0277. That's a total city tax rate of $71.85, which equates to $359.25 in property tax just for the city collection. And again, that's a small piece of the overall tax assessment for a property owner, because you also have the state, schools, and county, and other special districts. But the city itself receives $359.25, up from $3.58 from 2024. And to put it in context, that annual amount is roughly $30 per month. And again, it's quite a value for all the services, both general services and direct services that the city provides to the community. And then in terms of budget comparison, with all the increases in rates, with the increase in city property tax, increase in water, wastewater, and stormwater rates, it equates to a $9 additional a month going into 2025 based on a $500,000 home value. So again, that kind of reads back that we're trying to be sensitive to our constituency and our property owners and the community, but still be able to provide high-quality services. So, getting down to the end. And really wanted to end this with a little bit of a budget summary. One of the things I know in past budgets, I have heard the question, it's always difficult to find what we're truly funding for certain priorities. And so I wanted to kind of highlight some of those investments that the 2025 budget is making, aligned with council priorities. So in the world of public safety, we're looking at, in 2025, investing $36.8 million in public safety. That includes operation, court services, jails, new police station. So we're really creating a commitment for that aspect. In terms of quality infrastructure, if you remove those things from the council work program. $21.6 million investments in streets and infrastructure. That includes the TBD program, the streets maintenance program, and capital projects. Utility infrastructure, again, quality infrastructure. This budget provides $48 million in investment in our utilities. And parks, culture, and recreation, $10.7 million. And that includes the capital projects as well as the maintenance and parks program and services. I think those are worthy to note that those are substantial investments that the city is making in those council priorities. Additional priorities we're making is estimated in climate initiatives. This budget anticipates $1.8 million in investment in climate initiatives. And I think that's something too that we've heard in terms of council priorities in the past. We've set aside $200,000 in budget dollars, but also the value of staffing, and that staffing also seeking and administering grants. And a lot of that dollars is coming in from grants that we've been able to leverage with local dollars. Human services, equating at $1.2 million in investment in human services, $1 million in economic initiatives. Emergency management, which is, we just adopted the new emergency management plan. So now we're starting to fund implementation of that plan and starting to set up money for training. And this budget anticipates $275,000 towards that. Housing initiatives, again, this is something that's always been on the radar for council with $3.9 million investment in housing initiatives. We'll talk about one of those opportunities next week at the joint meeting with the lot surplus property. Also, that includes the $3 million that's dedicated for the Franz Anderson Road project in Olympia, and then also staffing as well. And then finally, the Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Belonging program. And again, that's a new program as well, so we're starting to build up implementation of that, and we're investing $200,000 towards that effort as well. One thing I want to talk about with these estimates is they are that just now, and they also intended to include not only just direct funding, but also staff costs and all that in that full number. And as we get to the end of the year and final budget adoption, we're going to refine these numbers and have informational sheets to articulate what those programs are, where they come from, and where are the initiatives underneath them. So we'll have more information to come. So again, in summary, the 2020-25 budget is, proposed budget is balanced. This budget implements council priorities. It does include 3 staff positions supported by dedicated funding. This does not add positions or expand expenditures beyond by the general fund, except for carryover expenditures from the previous year. And then, of course, operation and maintenance enhancements are very limited to keep the use of those reserves to a manageable level. And then the capital projects, maintenance, initiatives are funded by one-time reserves or grant resources. So I think it's been a fiscally responsive budget with the projections that we're under and the cost that we've been seeing over last year. Looking ahead, again, as I mentioned throughout the presentation, this budget does have a $2.5 million operating deficit. If you remember those numbers from the staff increase minus the projected revenues, we were able to get that down by several $100,000. However, we do have that going forward. And so part of the request going into this budget review process and ultimate decision is for council to consider the fiscal policy to propose $2.5 million in budget policy reserves to offset that deficit this year, with the plan going forward to look at how we take some actions to address the 2026 budget. That action is looking at and developing and implement the strategic and economic development investment plan. We started having some conversations towards that a work session or two ago. Also, we need to evaluate our existing expenditures and look for savings and efficiencies. And then eventually we have to review for opportunities to expand or enhance our revenue sources and continue to, our sound budget administration. And then as part of our council retreat work, review our priorities and essential services to make sure that, again, we're being cognizant of our existing expenditures and looking for savings and efficiencies. And again, there's a lot there, but the I want to, again, articulate that we have this structural deficit, but we're in a good position to deal with that deficit going forward. Again, alluding back to sound fiscal practices of the city over the past years, we've had reserves. We set up reserves we're able to draw upon to cover this deficit this year. And it gives us time to start that work to plan and how we address these issues going in 2026 and 2027 and looking at multiple ways to address the issue, because it's not going to be one particular way or one solution. It's going to be a series of solutions that we're going to need to look at moving forward. So I look at the future with optimism. So for the rest of the review of the budget, you have the public participation portion of the budgetary process. Again, on Tuesday, November 5th, we'll have a public hearing to review the revenue sources and offer comments from the public. On November 19th will be the first of 2 budget hearings, the second being on December 3rd. And setting up the potential action by council to adopt a balanced budget for 2025 on December 17th of this year. So, and of course, the budget is available online. There is a website and QR code. I'll hold it up there. And I again, thank the council and the director team for patience in my budget presentation tonight. And also really want to thank the director team and their staff and their departments on being diligent in how they were looking at the requests and documenting those requests to make sure that they were, you know, again, critical needs, but understanding the situation of the city and working through that as a team. I also want to again highlight our finance director, Troy Wu, for all his efforts. It takes a lot of work, as well as his staff in the finance department. I want to acknowledge Christy Wolf here is in the back of the room as well as part of that team, and Chelsea Yearwood and the rest of the finance staff. They really put a lot of effort to get this document to this point, and now it's to hand it off to the council for consideration. So with that, I'll entertain if the council has any questions, and I know our director staff was also available as well.
Any questions? Councilmember Cox?
Well, it's not a question, it's a comment. I'd also like to thank the communications staff for the work they've done to make the budget even more transparent with the posted papers on the website. I think that's a really nice addition, and so thank you very much for that.
Thank you, and I goes without saying, but I feel bad I forgot that Shannon and her team, the communication, Donna Feliciano, who put all the budget slides together and has been working tons of hours on that, as well as Ty Keltner, our communications manager, and John Cope for setting up the presentation too. So I feel remiss that I didn't, but I want to thank the communications team as well, because couldn't have done it without them.
Anyone else? Can you go back to our levy rate that shows what it's been over the, I know it's real early on, it's probably a number early on slide. Yeah, there we go. I appreciate that. Oh, I lost it. There it goes.
Oh,
Yeah,
there's 2 different
So-
screens. Oh, Shannon's got it.
appreciate it. So I've mentioned this in years past, and I'll mention it again. The fact that we have a levy rate from a city of our size at 69 cents before the additional very little bit we have on our remaining for our bonds, I would say is way too low for our city our size. What's happened is we've grown exponentially in the city of Lacey. We have added a ton of assessed value, which has caused this rate to plummet. What we talked about, back when the rate was like around, 117, 121, something like that, is adding a Parks District. And that was going to add, I don't know, I think 47 cents, something like that. It was 42 cents. It was going to work its way to 42 cents over several years. What this chart shows is that instead of our levy rate increasing that much, it would have been covered, more than covered, by our additional assessed value. And so we wouldn't have seen that increase in the levy rate. It would have stayed flat and dropped. I think, according to my math, it would still have dropped compared to it if that would have passed. That alone, going to the general fund, would, I'm not sure if I'd have to see the numbers, but it'd come close to be solving our structural deficit that we have right now.
I think it's 5.8.
Yeah, and so, I think that this is, I think, a glaring issue that we're having in our community and why we're seeing a structural deficit. You cannot provide the services a city our size provides and have a levy rate this low. I mean, there's not another city, probably in the state of Washington, that has a levy rate this low. And what you're actually seeing in most cities is them going for levy increases above and beyond what they're already allowed. Our levy is so low, that's like an impossibility for us to get to that point. And so I think this is something that we need to sort of keep in mind. The debt that we have put out there for major improvements in our community, that debt is about to be paid off. That would increase this levy rate even more. And we need to figure out a better way to balance across sales tax, property tax, to provide services to our community. And if we would have done that back, we missed out by 60-something votes. If we would have done that back in the time, like I said, our levy rate would have basically stayed flat, and we wouldn't be in this situation at all. And so I think this is the conversation we need to think more strategically. And I know property taxes are complicated, and I appreciate the assessor coming this last meeting and trying to explain it. But I think what sort of can get missed in all that is when you grow so much in assessed value, that property tax is only going up 1% every year. Anyway, I just want to point that out. I doubt you're going to find any city in Washington State has a levy rate this low, and I would argue it's way too low for our city our size to be able to provide ongoing services to our community. That's all I want to say about that. I do want to ask a few questions about our utilities and our utility tax, and of course, hopefully you expect me to be taking a look at that. One of the things that we did when we passed a multi-year rate is we had this idea of projections of what our revenues were going to be and what our expenses were going to be. But since we don't look at the rate, we passed this multi-year rate, we're not looking at those numbers any longer, right? And so I'm sort of curious as where are we when it comes to what we said we were going to bring in to what we've actually spent, to know that that multi-year rate is still on track to what we said it was going to be on track for. I know I'm not expecting you to do that off the top of your head, Troy. That'd be too much. But I'm also interested in getting an update when it comes to our senior discounts and our low-income discounts on our utilities. I know we have a program. We don't really hear much about that program. That is, our utility rates going up again next year is going to be our biggest increase in cost to our community. It's not going to be our property taxes, right? That's not going anywhere. That's rates dropping again. So it's going to be our utilities. And so that's why I've always sort of been laser focused on this and making sure we've projected as that we're going to receive a certain amount. I'd just like to know where we're at on that, just to make sure we're on the same projected path.
Sure, we could look at those details, but I could answer it maybe from a more simple standpoint. So obviously, the expenditures fluctuate, and our projection's always wrong. I've always said that no matter what I guess, we're going to be wrong, and same thing with the revenues. But we are scheduled to issue debt in 2 of our utilities, which is really a statement that those revenues aren't enough to cover the capital demands of our utilities. So we are scheduled to issue $6 million in Public Works Board loans next year for water. At some point, we will be issuing debt in our sewer department. So again, it's not a detailed answer that you were looking for, but just the overall financial condition shows we will need to borrow money to pay for those capital needs.
And I understand that, and that was always a part of this rate. We knew that we were going to need to issue debt, and so the rate needed to go up certain percentage points so we can continue to pay that debt off, right? I just want to make sure we're still on that same path.
We can put together, and also too, there's the inflationary factor of cost too. That comes in.
Absolutely.
So we got to recognize that as well, that even though the projects may slow down, that time adds money too.
Yeah, I fully expect that we're on this path that we expected to be, but this is the one thing that we can control. It is by our body that we raise the utility tax, and I just want to make sure that we can stand by our word and that we are where we said we were going to be. Okay. Does anyone else have any other questions?
Thank you,
Thank you.
Council.